Hello everyone, can you guys quickly confirm if I'm audible to you guys? आप लोग मुझे सुन पा रहे हैं, आप लोग मुझे देख पा रहे हैं? Please comment करिए YouTube में ताकि I get to know that all thing is all sorted and then we can quickly get started. Very good morning everyone. Can you guys confirm if I'm quick confirmation will help. I can see yes. Uh, अभी आवाज आ रही है आप लोगों को? परफेक्ट. सो मैंने फोन दिया हुआ है. आई कीप ऑन लुकिंग एट द फोन ताकि मैं आपके मैसेजेस को पढ़ पाऊं. दिस सेशन इज मोस्टली लाइव ऑन यूट्यूब एंड आने वाले हफ्तों में ऐसे ही खूब सारे सेशन हम करने वाले हैं. खूब सारे लाइव सेशंस आपको पढ़ाने वाला हूं. आज के सेशन में विल कंटिन्यू वेयर वी स्टॉप्ड इन द लास्ट टू सेशंस ऑफ द जावा. ठीक है. लेट मी क्विकली शेयर माय स्क्रीन एंड गेट स्टार्टेड पीपल. परफेक्ट. I hope you are able to see my screen. Uh, इसको मैं अगर थोड़ा सा छोटा कर दूं तो एक बार जूम ओपन करता हूँ. Perfect. Cool. So I think let's get started. I think we are all sorted now. So today will be the day 3. आप लोग जो पहली दफा अगर इस वीडियो को देख रहे हैं, this is a Java series that I'm doing live. In our first 2 days, day 1 and day 2, इन 2 दिनों में we just got started with Java. और पिछले 2 दिनों में we have understood about भैया Java क्या होता है, why you should learn Java, what it makes sense to learn Java. And then we also talked about data types. We talked about variables. We talked about loops. And we talked about the conditionals. इन सारी चीजों के बारे में हमने पिछले 2 वीडियोस में देखा है. अगर आपने वो वीडियो नहीं देखा है तो आप ये कोशिश करोगे कि इस सेशन के बाद प्लीज गो एंड वॉच इट. Because भले if you are a fresher, you're learning it for the first time, or you're a final year student, or you're an experienced person, I think the topic that we have covered is in very depth, and it will help us get the confidence and the learning and the concept which will help us crack the job interviews. ठीक है. तो ये था डे 1 डे 2 का. आज हम बात करेंगे सर डे 3 का. ठीक है ना. और आज का जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है विच इज इंपॉर्टेंट फ्रॉम द इंटरव्यू पर्सपेक्टिव, इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट फ्रॉम द perspective of learning Java so that tomorrow you can build the softwares in it. And that concept is called as OOPS. It stands for the object oriented principles. ठीक है, तो सारे ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रिंसिपल्स को we'll try to understand today. We'll go deeper into that and we'll make sure that this is the only session that we need in our life to go and master that. So let's start one after the another. The very first and the core of our object oriented principles in Java is a concept called as concept of class and objects. ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ क्लास एंड ऑब्जेक्ट है ये सबसे कोर बेसिक प्रिंसिपल है ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रोग्रामिंग का. Now I know that you must be already aware of. Can any of you in the class, आप में से कई सारे लोग अभी ये लाइव वीडियो को देख रहे हैं, कई सारे लोग इसको रिकॉर्डेड देखेंगे. Can you guys tell me, just pause right now and tell me कि boss, what is class and what is object? होता क्या है class and object? Anybody help me understand this? What is class and what is objects? Anyone in the class? किसको कहते हैं क्लास, किसको कहते हैं ऑब्जेक्ट्स? कोई बताएगा मुझे? देखो, इन ऑर्डर टू अंडरस्टैंड द मीनिंग, मुझे पता है काफी लोगों को पता होगा, पर इसको थोड़े और अच्छे तरीके से अगर हम समझे, रेशनल समझे कि बॉस व्हाई डू आई नीड टू मास्टर क्लास एंड ऑब्जेक्ट, वी ट्राई टू लर्न द डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेजेस. The first type of programming language which was very famous in the market, that was called as procedural programming language. Example of that is C. आप ऐसे कोई भी अगर आप इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हो, आप सभी को फर्स्ट ईयर में यू हैव टू गो एंड लर्न अ प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज सी. सी इज वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट फंडामेंटल प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज दैट यू पीपल आर टॉट. ये किस टाइप का प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज है? प्रोसीड्यूरल प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज इज अ काइंड ऑफ अ प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज. वो ये कहता है कि बॉस अगर आपके पास देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम, if there is a problem P, what you try to do is that you try to go and break this problem into the multiple steps. Step 1, then step 2, then step 3, then step 4, and then you are done. So when you try to break the big problem into small chotu chunks, in step 1, then step 2, then step 3, and then step 4, this style of solving the problem is called as procedural programming. And after every step here, you can take a Boolean decision. If it is true, I'll go to the step 3. If it is false, then I'll go to the step 2. And that's one of the reason why जब आप लोगों को C पढ़ाया जाता था, आपको एक चीजें पढ़ाई जाती थी, उसको हम कहते थे फ्लो चार्ट, राइट? और फ्लो चार्ट में हम क्या करते थे बॉस? In the flow chart, we used to divide the entire problem into the smaller chotu steps. So this was the first big hit in terms of the high level programming language. Around 1980s के आसपास में it has been founded, and it till now it is a big hit. Even today, if let's say that if you have to build the microprocessors, if you have to go and build the things where typically you have to solve the problems in the mathematical sense or a statistical sense, you want to do a faster computation. At all those places, C type of a programming language is still being used. Okay? Why? Because if the problem is mathematical, yeah, problem is statistical, right? Mathematical है या फिर statistical है. In those cases, you can break a bigger problem into the smaller steps, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3 में करके आप break कर सकते हो, and that way it will be helpful. तो वहां पे C जैसा programming language will help. But what happened around year 2000s? A new thing came up in the world which took the entire world by the storm. Can you guys make a guess what was that? 2000 के दौरान पूरी दुनिया में एक नई चीज लोगों को मिली जिससे कि पूरी दुनिया टेक्नोलॉजी की, रियल वर्ल्ड की, that all got shaken badly. And that thing was coming up of the internet. Or I can say that it was a WWW revolution. WWW revolution के आने की वजह से क्या हो गया? People started building applications for the real world. For example, if I go and talk about today, right? आज के दिन में From the morning till the night, for everything that I do, somehow I'm dependent on the applications which runs over the internet. For example, in the morning when I get up, if I'm feeling hungry, I'll go and order Swiggy for my breakfast. If I have to order any item, I can go and order from the Amazon, right? If I have to talk to any friend, I have WhatsApp. If I have to do any kind of, the social media stuff, I have Instagram, right? आज की डेट में तो सर आप लोगों के लिए डेटिंग भी सॉर्टेड है, right? Gone are the days when you have to have the guts to go and ask someone for a date. These days, you can just sleep on your bed and do swipe left, swipe right? So you have something called as Tinder. Tinder से बात नहीं बनी तो you have something called as Shaadi.com. और शादी करके अगर परेशान हो गया तो then you have the doctor.com. The point that I'm trying to tell here with all this point is that from morning till night, you look around yourself, you have the applications which are solving the problems of the real world. What that also mean is that आज की डेट में आप सभी लोग जब आप कॉलेज से बाहर निकलोगे या फिर ऑलरेडी अगर आप बाहर हो और आप जॉब्स ढूंढने की कोशिश करोगे, so any company that you'll try to go and apply the job for, this company will be trying to solve the problem for real world. कोई भी कंपनी आज के डेट में, गूगल, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट, लिंक्डइन, you take a name of a company and every company is trying to solve the problem for the real world itself. तो 1980 से 2000 तक जो मेन प्रॉब्लम था, that was mathematical, that was related to the computers. Of late, all thanks to the internet, आज के डेट में most of the problem that we are trying to solve are the real world problems. क्या है सर वो? These are the real world problems. अब रियल वर्ल्ड प्रॉब्लम के अपने चैलेंजेस हैं. अभी तक आपके पास था प्रोसीड्यूरल प्रोग्रामिंग, है ना? पर अगर मैं रियल वर्ल्ड प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व कर रहा हूं, राइट, तो देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज द रियल वर्ल्ड. और रियल वर्ल्ड में आपके दो तरीके के लोग होते हैं. एक होता है आपका लिविंग बीइंग लाइक ह्यूमंस एंड द नॉन लिविंग बीइंग्स, फॉर एग्जांपल लाइक कार. अब ये दोनों लिविंग एंड नॉन लिविंग बीइंग जो है, फॉर एग्जांपल लिविंग बीइंग विल आल्सो हैव समथिंग कॉल्ड एज अ, for example, it will have a state. For example, it will have a name. This guy has an age, and will have a behavior that I can go and dance, I can go and eat. Same way, the non-living thing will have something called as a color. It will have something called as a brand. And these all are the state. And will have some kind of behavior that I go and apply the brake. I can go and accelerate. So these two things are the behavior. So in the real world, you have this real world entities. अब दोस्त ये है कि अगर मैं रियल वर्ल्ड के प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करना चाहता हूं इन द वर्ल्ड ऑफ प्रोग्रामिंग, अगर मैं रियल वर्ल्ड के प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करना चाहता हूं इन द वर्ल्ड ऑफ द प्रोग्रामिंग, तो मुझे समहाउ इसको रिप्रेजेंट करना पड़ेगा, है ना? मैं क्या कह रहा हूं, आपके रियल वर्ल्ड में ह्यूमंस हैं, आपके रियल वर्ल्ड में व्हीकल्स हैं. अगर आप चाहते हो कि इसको मैं प्रोग्रामिंग की दुनिया में सॉल्व करूं, तो I will have to go and represent this in the world of the program. How do I do it? अभी तक जो हमारे पास प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज था, फॉर एग्जांपल C, which was a procedural programming language, that was not competent enough to do anything. So in order to represent this real world entities in the world of the programming, a new type of a concept came into the action, which is called as the objects. Objects के पास भी state होगा, object के पास भी behavior होगा, and this object will be used to mimic this real world objects. real world entities को प्रोग्रामिंग की दुनिया में रिप्रेजेंट करने के लिए जिस चीज का यूज करते हैं उसको हम कहते हैं ऑब्जेक्ट्स. Am I clear? Does it make sense? So how to convert the real world objects into the world of programming using a concept called as an object? That's for the first part. But then people said that, okay, boss, you have been able to represent the real world entities in the world of programming with the help of a concept called as an objects. But the real world, solving the problems of the real world required more things. And that additional thing, which is very complex. And what is that additional thing? See, in this world, anything which happens, any outcome that you get is always because of the different object kind of shared some kind of relationship. Say, for example, if I have to even buy a medicine, what I'll have to do, I'll have to go down, I'll have to interact with my car. So I have some kind of relationship with my car. I'll have to drive that car, go to the pharmacy shop, I'll have to interact with the pharmacy wale bhaiya, tell him that hey, I need Dolo 650. So any kind of outcome, any kind of action that happens, it involves the interaction between the entities. So another important thing which is there in the real world is called as a relationship. अब मैं relationship को programming की दुनिया में कैसे represent करूंगा? So to represent the relationship in the world of the programming, we came up with a concept called as the object-oriented principles. An object-oriented principle says that, boss, if you understand the object-oriented principle, then you'll be able to bring the relationship between the objects. So in order to fully leverage the power of object-oriented programming like Java, it becomes very important for us to understand typically what an object is, and then understand the object-oriented principles. और object oriented principles क्या क्या होते हैं दोस्त? It includes the concepts like abstraction. It includes the concepts like inheritance. It includes the concepts like polymorphism. And it includes the concept like, what is that? Encapsulation. An object बनेगा कैसे? Object is built with something called as a class. तो ये सारे जो कॉन्सेप्ट है जो मैं आज आप लोगों को कराने वाला हूं, इट्स गोइंग टू बी एक्सीडिंगली इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट. आपको कुछ करना नहीं है, आपको बस बने लगना है इस वीडियो के लास्ट तक. जिस तरीके से आपने इस वीडियो को ज्वाइन करा इन द बिगनिंग, मेक श्योर दैट इन सिंगल स्ट्रेच लाइव पढ़ा रहा हूं मैं आपको, आप मेरे साथ लाइव बने रहिए. कुछ लोग कह रहे हैं सर इंटरव्यू सीरीज लाइए. सर मेरा पूरा ध्यान अब इस बार ये है कि मैं कैसे ज्यादा से ज्यादा चीजें आप लोगों को बिल्कुल ही फ्री अगले 6-7 महीने तक पढ़ाऊं. ठीक है ना? Being a founder of the company, I have to move here and there. कई सारे engagements थे अभी, I've been traveling a lot. पर वो सारी चीजें अब धीरे धीरे sort हो रही हैं. And my whole intention is that in the coming few months, be it agentic AI, be it Python, be it Java, be it full stack development, the beautiful part is that I have worked extensively 15-16 सालों से. I know all these stacks. And I'm planning to bring a dedicated course, all free, well structured on the YouTube. Just allow me some time and shower some love. And then I'll keep on bringing the sessions like this. आज भी मुझे मीटिंग के लिए जाना, पर फिर भी I thought कि काफी लंबा गैप आ गया है, so I should go and do this. So I'll keep on bringing it. पर आज के सेशन में हम ये सारी चीजें आज क्रिस्टल क्लियर करेंगे कि भैया क्लास क्या है, ऑब्जेक्ट क्या है, और ये ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रिंसिपल्स क्या है, और इससे कैसे आपसे कंपनीज इंटरव्यू में घुमा घुमा कर क्वेश्चन पूछे जा सकते हैं. ठीक है? कमिंग बैक टू दिस टॉपिक ऑफ क्लास, मैंने देखा है कि आप में से कई लोगों ने कमेंट में आंसर लिखा है मुझे, क्लास क्या होता है और ऑब्जेक्ट क्या होता है. क्लास का सिंपल मतलब है, इन वेरी सिंपल वर्ड, क्लास द मीनिंग इज दैट क्लास इज लाइक अ टेम्पलेट. Class is more of like a simple, if I word I go and say that it is a type. And what is an object? Object is basically an instance of the class. ऑब्जेक्ट क्या है दोस्त? ऑब्जेक्ट है भैया इंस्टेंस ऑफ द क्लास. क्या मतलब है इसका? लेट्स ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड. लेट्स से दैट आई गो एंड कॉल इट दैट ह्यूमन. लेट्स से दैट फॉर एग्जांपल पर्सन इज अ क्लास. मैं कह रहा हूं एक जो पर्सन है, हर एक पर्सन का एक नाम होगा, हर एक पर्सन का कोई एज होगा, और हर एक पर्सन का कोई एक जेंडर होगा. राइट? दिस इज आई विल गो एंड कॉल इट द स्टेट ऑफ द पर्सन. और साथ में बोलूंगा कि हर पर्सन को खाना खाने आना चाहिए, हर एक पर्सन को डांस करना आना चाहिए. तो मैंने क्या बोल दिया? ये पर्सन का टेम्पलेट है. जो भी पर्सन इस दुनिया में बनने वाला है, ऑल द पर्सन दैट इज गोना गेट क्रिएटेड इन दिस वर्ल्ड विल हैव अ नेम, विल हैव अ एज, विल हैव अ जेंडर, and that person should know how to eat, and that person should know how to dance. That's how the person looks like. Fair? अब जब मैं एक स्पेसिफिक पर्सन की बात बोलता हूं, ये एक पर्सन है जिसका की नाम है विश्वा, जिसका की एज है 99 ईयर्स, जिसका की जेंडर है मेल, एंड व्हेन आई टॉक अबाउट ईट, ही ईट फास्ट, एंड व्हेन ही टॉक्स अबाउट डांस, ही डांसेस स्लो। तो ये जो इंस्टेंस है, जो कि इस पर्सन का एक्चुअल इंस्टेंस है, इसको मैं बोलूंगा बॉस ये मेरा ऑब्जेक्ट है। और एक क्लास के देयर कुड बी मल्टीपल ऑब्जेक्ट, देयर कुड बी अनदर पर्सन, से फॉर एग्जांपल आई हैव अनदर पर्सन दैट लुक्स समथिंग लाइक दिस, राइट? हिज नेम इज शिवानी, right? Age is 98, right? Gender is female, right? She eats slow and she dances fast, right? So ये जो स्पेसिफिक इंस्टेंस है, जब आप क्लासेस में वैल्यू सेट कर देते हो, उसको हम कहते हैं दोस्त ऑब्जेक्ट। Am I clear till this point? Does it make sense? Everyone in the class? So what is class? Class is a type and object is an instance. Class is a type. So in simple words, if I have to go and say that class is a type, an object is created from the class, and object is the instance। ठीक है, एक और एग्जांपल ले ले। मान लो मैं कहता हूं कि भैया दुनिया का कोई भी जो कार है, उसका एक होना चाहिए कलर, उसका एक होना चाहिए ब्रांड, राइट? एंड इट शुड बी एबल टू एक्सीलरेट, and it should be able to put a brake, right? And then based on this, if I go and talk about the specific car, for example, I have one car whose color is red and whose brand is I-20. This could be one car. There could be another car which could be, say for example, it is black color and the brand is BMW, right? So these are the specific instances of the class. Is everyone in the class clear? बताइए sir. Is everyone clear till this point? Fair? Awesome. So now I know that, let's say that is a human and it has a name and it has an age, right? And let's say that it has something called as a country. If I have to go and represent this guy in the world of programming, then what I'll have to do is that I'll have to first of all create the class, person class, and from the person class I can go and create the person object. अब ये जो पूरा कन्वर्शन है पर्सन क्लास से पर्सन ऑब्जेक्ट बनाने का, let's try to see that how do we go and do it in the world of programming. So for that, let me go and open my Eclipse. Let me close this. ये नहीं था. What was the last class? Let me open the another file. Perfect. तो अब मैं यहाँ पे क्या करता हूँ, लेट मी गो एंड क्रिएट, इसके अंदर में एक मैं एक पैकेज बना लेता हूँ, एंड लेट मी गो एंड कॉल इट एज कोड्स डॉट डे 3। ओके, और इसके अंदर मैं फाइल बनाता हूँ व्हिच आई गो एंड कॉल इट एज पर्सन क्लास। Go and remove all the old class. मुझे क्या बनाना था दोस्त? Let me go and open my desk scribble. अब यहाँ पे क्या है, मेरा मेरा है यहाँ पे, मुझे एक पर्सन बनाना है, और उस पर्सन का अब क्या होना चाहिए, एक नाम होना चाहिए, एक एज होना चाहिए, और एक कंट्री होना चाहिए। ठीक है। तो फॉर डूइंग दिस व्हाट आई हैव टू डू, आई हैव टू गो एंड डिफाइन अ क्लास। तो मैंने वो क्लास बना लिया है, क्लास कीवर्ड, और उसके बाद मुझे एट्रीब्यूट देने। तो फॉर एग्जांपल इट शुड हैव समथिंग कॉल्ड एज पब्लिक इंट स्ट्रिंग नेम। ठीक है। देन आई कैन गो एंड से दैट पब्लिक int age, and then I can go and say that public string country। अपने पास तीन चीजें आ गई, अपने पास नाम आ गया, अपने पास एज आ गया, अपने पास कंट्री आ गई। ये जो हमने यहाँ पे बनाया है इसको हम कहते हैं, ये सारे हो गए इनके, तो कहते हैं एट्रीब्यूट्स, और आई कैन गो एंड कॉल इट एज स्टेट। दिस इज कॉल्ड एज एट्रीब्यूट और स्टेट। एंड साथ में इसके अलावा वी हैव समथिंग कॉल्ड एज अ बिहेवियर। सो फॉर एग्जांपल आई कैन से दैट दिस पर्सन कैन डांस, सो आई कैन से दैट पब्लिक void, and I can go and say that dance, and I can just simply go and call it as out dancing. And we can have another method called as eat. I can go and call it as public void eat and says out, और यहाँ पे बोलूंगा eating। ठीक। तो ये जो सामने आपको कोड दिख रहा है दोस्त, इस कोड को हम लोग बोलते हैं कि हमने पर्सन क्लास बना दिया है। एवरी क्लास will comprise of two things. It will have the fields and it will have the methods. Fields को कहा जाता है state, और methods will define the behavior. So for example, in this case, these are the state and these are the behavior. Am I clear to this point? Does it make sense? Everyone? Is everyone making sense here? तो हमने एक क्लास बनाया, क्लास में आपके पास फील्ड्स है, क्लास में आपके पास बिहेवियर है, डांस एंड ईट। बट क्लास से कुछ भी नहीं होगा। क्लास इज जस्ट अ टेम्पलेट। इफ आई हैव टू मेक क्लास इनटू द एक्शन, अगर मुझे इसको यूज करना है, तो व्हाट आई हैव टू डू इज दैट आई हैव टू क्रिएट फ्रॉम दिस क्लास, आई हैव टू क्रिएट द ऑब्जेक्ट। और मैं ऑब्जेक्ट जब क्रिएट करूंगा तभी उसको यूज कर पाऊंगा। अगर मैं पर्सन क्लास को यूज करना चाहता हूं, आई कैन नॉट यूज इट डायरेक्टली लाइक दैट। आई हैव टू क्रिएट फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल द ऑब्जेक्ट फ्रॉम दिस क्लास, एंड आई एम एबल टू क्रिएट इट, दैट विल वर्क आउट। So in order to use it, what I'll do is that I'll go and create another class here. I'll come here and I'll be going to call it as test class test. ठीक है। और इस टेस्ट क्लास के अंदर में let me go and write a method called as public static void main string args। अब ये दूसरा क्लास मैंने बनाया टेस्ट, and I know that in a class if I have to execute anything I need to have a public static void main method, so I have this public static void main method. This is a person class. अब अगर क्लास से मुझे अगर ऑब्जेक्ट बनाना है, व्हाट आई वांट टू डू, आई वांट टू गो एंड क्रिएट द पर्सन ऑब्जेक्ट। आई वांट टू गो एंड क्रिएट द पर्सन ऑब्जेक्ट। वन सेकेंड, आई हैव टू गो एंड क्रिएट द पर्सन object. So for creating the person object, what I need to do is I'll go and first of all define the type of the variable which is person. I go and call it as a p and then new person. अब दोस्त यहाँ पे अगर आप ध्यान से देखोगे, ठीक है ना, तो ये जो पर्सन p है जिसका टाइप पर्सन है, और ये this new is a keyword which is used for creating a new objects from the class। ठीक है। ये जो पूरी चीज आप देख रहे हो यहाँ पे हम क्या करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, आई एम ट्राइंग टू क्रिएट अ पर्सन ऑब्जेक्ट। और पर्सन ऑब्जेक्ट बनाने के लिए व्हाट आई हैव डन इज आई हैव यूज्ड अ कीवर्ड कॉल्ड एज न्यू पर्सन। आई हैव यूज्ड अ कीवर्ड कॉल्ड एज अ न्यू पर्सन। न्यू इज अ कीवर्ड इन जावा which is used to create the objects from the class, and what this you see is called as a default constructor. Constructor is a special method in a class which is used to create the objects from the class. आप इस तरीके से सोच लो कि मान लो if there is something called as an almighty God who create humans. So he will have a template of creating the humans, and the tool which he will use, the almighty will use to create humans, let's say that if it is there, that tool is called as a constructor. So ये जो पूरा function आपको यहाँ पे दिखाई दे रहा है इसको हम कहते हैं default constructor, guys. Now, since I'm using a word called as a default constructor, what it means that every class in Java, अगर आप यहाँ पे देखो मैंने कोई constructor define नहीं करा है, but every class in Java by default will have its a default constructor. Because class का अपना कोई use है ही नहीं. A class cannot be used on its own unless until you go and create the object out of it, and that's why every class in Java will have something called as a default constructor, and I can go and call it how? I go and make use of a new keyword. Whatever is the name of the class person followed by this. So this is the default constructor that we have called. And now since I have called the object, I can actually go and call its method. So if I go and call it p dot dance, or I can go and say that p dot eat and try to run this application. You can run as Java application. I see that it is printing dancing, it is printing eating. But at the same time, if I go and call it as sysout, and I go and call it as p dot name, right? I'm going to call it as name. Right, p dot name. You can also put as list age, p dot age, and then I go and call it as p dot country. Right. If I go and run this, जब मैंने method call करा दोस्त, so this is printing dancing perfectly fine. When I say p dot eat, it is printing eating. But I'm trying to print the name of the object, age of the object, and the country of the object. It is all printing null, 0, and null. Can you guys tell me why? Why is it happening? When I'm trying to print the name of the object, it is printing as null. Can you guys tell me why it is happening so? ऐसा क्या हो रहा है? The reason for that is, in this, I have not initialized the name, age, and the country. And in this class, if I go and talk about this test class, I'm actually initializing with something called as a default constructor. Default constructor. And in this default constructor, I'm not telling boss what should be the name, what should be age, what should be the country. So one way of fixing is that we initialize the object. One way of fixing is that before I go and print this, if I go and say that, okay, now p dot name, object name should be equals to Vishwa. And I go and say that p dot age should be equals to 99. And I go and say that p dot country should be equals to India. If these three things are set, and now again, if I go and print this, तो मैं save करके अगर run कर दूं. Now, if you see it in the beginning when I printed, it was all null, but after that it is printing name as Vishwa, age as 99, country as India. So this is how we go and initialize the state. So one way of initializing the state of the object is that setting the values. So what I'm doing, I'm in this case, if I have to just highlight this, I'm just trying to set the state. I'm just setting the state. I'm setting that, okay, boss name should be Vishwa, age should be 99, country should be India, and I'm just setting the state. Fair. Am I clear to this point? Does it make sense? But Java says that, boss, this whole thing would be done inside constructor only। ये सारी चीजें मैं कंस्ट्रक्टर के अंदर में ज्यादा अच्छे तरीके से, ज्यादा ग्रेसफुली कर सकता हूं। कैसे कर सकते हैं? लेट्स ट्राई टू सी दैट, लेट्स गो बैक। मैं कहता हूं कि दोस्त इसके पास डिफॉल्ट कंस्ट्रक्टर तो है ही। I can go and define my own constructor. To define a known constructor, you go and use something called as public. Name of a constructor is always the same as the name of the class, so I can say that person. और मैं कह रहा हूं कि this I will use to initialize the string name, int age, and string country. Okay. आपने यहाँ पे क्या करा? आपने एक कंस्ट्रक्टर बना दिया है दोस्त। उस कंस्ट्रक्टर में आपने बोला है कि मैं नेम भी पास करूंगा, एज भी पास करूंगा और कंट्री भी करूंगा। और ये जो नेम, एज और कंट्री है, उसको मैं इसकी वैल्यू सेट करने के लिए इसके अंदर मैं लिखूंगा दिस डॉट नेम इक्वल्स टू नेम, दिस डॉट एज इज इक्वल्स टू एज, एंड दिस डॉट कंट्री इज इक्वल्स टू कंट्री। अभी जो आपको सामने दिख रहा है, दिस इज कॉल्ड एज अ कस्टम कंस्ट्रक्टर, दिस इज कॉल्ड एज अ constructor. Constructor is a special method in the Java class. The only difference between the constructor and the method is that it will have no return type. That's number one. Secondly, the name of the constructor should be exactly same as the class, same as class. Okay. तो ये हमने बना दिया, this is my custom constructor. अब जावा में एक और चीज है। जैसे ही आप in the world of Java, as soon as you have made your own constructor in the world of Java, as soon as you have made your own constructor, as soon as you make your own constructor, default constructor is lost. जावा कहते हैं दोस्त, अगर अपने क्लास में आपने कंस्ट्रक्टर नहीं डिफाइन करा है, then I take care of it. I'll go and provide you the default constructor. But in the case, if you decide that you will go and define your own constructor, default constructor is gone. So as soon as I go and define this line of code, if I go back to this class, you will see that this line has started giving me the error. This line has started giving me the error because now this is not available. If you want this constructor to still be available, what you will have to do is that you will have to again go and define one more constructor inside this class. So what I'll have to do, this is one constructor. I'll go and define another constructor, which should look something like this: public person. So this was the initially default constructor available, but I'll have to define define again. And now if I go and save this, if I go and save this, I'll go back. I think the error has gone, right? So key point is that, मैं एक बार फिर से यहाँ पे लिख दूं, in Java every class has a default constructor. Every class has a default constructor. So in Java, every class has a default constructor. ठीक है? But as soon as you go and define your own constructor, right? As soon as you go and define your own custom constructor, this goes for a toss, right? Then default constructor, then no more is available, right? So you have a custom constructor, and when you have that, then default constructor goes for the toss. Am I clear till this point? Does it make sense, everyone? Now, since I have one constructor which can take name, age, country. यहाँ पे एक और चीज आपको ध्यान में देनी होगी, which is more important, is this keyword. This का मतलब होता है this represents the object which will be created. What's it this? This represents the object which will be created. For example, यहाँ पे ये नेम, ये एज और ये कंट्री एज अ पैरामीटर, एज अ आर्गुमेंट इट विल बी प्रोवाइडेड, और दिस डॉट नेम इज द, जो ऑब्जेक्ट है उसका नाम आप ये नाम सेट कर दो, जो ऑब्जेक्ट बनने वाला है उसका जो एज है वो ये वाला एज सेट कर दो, जो ऑब्जेक्ट बनने वाला है दिस डॉट कंट्री सेइंग दैट ओके दिस ऑब्जेक्ट इज गेटिंग क्रिएटेड, उसका जो कंट्री है आप ये कंट्री यहाँ पे जाके सेट कर दो. दिस इज व्हाट इट इज एक्सपेक्टिंग टू डू. Fair. So now what I can do here is that instead of calling this person bluntly like this, I can go and say that boss name is Mohan, and I go and say that age is 99, 98, let's say that. And I go and say that boss, the country is India always. अब जब मैंने ये constructor use करा है, and if I go and try to run this now, right? If I go and try to run this run as Java application, तो मैं क्या देख रहा हूँ? In the constructor itself, I have these fields updated. So I have this name equals to Mohan, age equals to 98, and then country equals to India. Once you have defined the object, you can always go and override the state. So I'm just changing the state. And after changing the state, this is how it looks. This is the name, this is the age, this is the country, this is how it looks like. Fair enough. So with this, we know that in a Java class, you can have more than one constructor. When you have more than one constructor in a class, that typically is called as a constructor loading, constructor overloading. जब आपके क्लास में एक से ज्यादा कंस्ट्रक्टर हो तो हम कहते हैं कंस्ट्रक्टर भैया ओवरलोड हो चुका है. ठीक है, एक और कॉन्सेप्ट यहाँ पे देख लेते हैं. लेट्स से दैट आई हैव वन मोर constructor which is public static public another person, I'll use string name and age, and I go and call it this dot name equals to name, this dot age equals to age. Okay, अब मेरे पास यहाँ पे तीन कंस्ट्रक्टर आ गए है ना. दिस इज 1, दिस इज 2 एंड दिस इज 3. तो कंस्ट्रक्टर ओवरलोडिंग तो हो रहा है. अब मुझे पता है कि अगर मैं दो नेम और एज लूं तो ये वाला कंस्ट्रक्टर मुझे कॉल करना है. यहाँ पे मैं नेम और एज तो ले ही रहा हूं, एंड देन आई हैव दिस कंट्री. ओके, can I call one constructor inside the another constructor? My question is, can I call one constructor inside another constructor? क्या मैं एक कंस्ट्रक्टर के अंदर में दूसरा कंस्ट्रक्टर कॉल कर सकता हूं? दिस इज माय क्वेश्चन. हाउ डू आई डू इट? तो उसके लिए मैं यहाँ पे क्या कर सकता हूँ? If I have to go and call the another constructor, I go and call it as this, and then I go and pass name, and then I go and pass age. जब भी आपको एक कंस्ट्रक्टर के अंदर में दूसरे कंस्ट्रक्टर को कॉल करना है, let's say that I have this constructor, I know there is another constructor which takes this name and age. So what I have done this, when I do this, I am actually calling this constructor. So this is how using the this keyword. तो हमने दो चीजें देख ली. एक पहली चीज दिस का जो यूसेज था वो क्या था? इट रिप्रेजेंट्स ऑब्जेक्ट टू बी क्रिएटेड, दैट्स नंबर 1. और दूसरा यूसेज ऑफ दिस इज टू कॉल द अनदर कंस्ट्रक्टर ऑफ द सेम क्लास. फेयर इनफ? एम आई मेकिंग सेंस? अब अगर सीक्वेंस को अगर आपको देखना है तो आप यहाँ पे एक प्रिंट स्टेटमेंट डाल दीजिए. तो आप यहाँ पे डाल दीजिए sys out inside the three arg constructor. Then you write here inside the two arg constructor, right? अब जैसे ही आपने यहाँ पे लिखा सिस्टम, सर ये छोटी छोटी बातें बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट बातें, मैं कंसेप्चुअली हर एक स्टेप कर रहा हूँ, प्लीज ध्यान से देखना। जैसे मैंने दिस के ऊपर में लिखा, यहाँ पे आपका एरर आ गया। व्हाट इज दैट एरर मींस? एरर का मतलब होता है कंस्ट्रक्टर के अंदर में सबसे पहला अगर कुछ चीज होगा तो वो होगा दिस वाला, दिस कैन नॉट बी द फर्स्ट लाइन। ठीक है, तो उसको मुझे फिक्स करने के लिए क्या करना होगा? आई हैव टू गो एंड टेक दिस आउट एंड पुट आफ्टर दिस। अगर मैं इसको अब रन करने की कोशिश करूं, राइट, लेट मी गो बैक टू द नेक्स्ट टेस्ट क्लास, लेट इट रन दिस, रन एज। तो अब क्या देखोगे, सबसे पहले वो क्या कर रहा है? इनसाइड द थर्ड आर्गुमेंट कंस्ट्रक्टर। ठीक है, उसके बाद उसने कॉल किया इनसाइड द सेकेंड आर्गुमेंट कंस्ट्रक्टर, राइट। और नेम और एज फिर जाके वहां पे सेट हो रहा है। आई गो एंड ट्राई टू रन दिस, रन एज। तो सबसे पहले क्या हो रहा है? सबसे पहले प्रिंट हो रहा है इनसाइड द two R's constructor, then I have the three R constructor. How is it happening? If I go and try to relook into this, यहाँ पे आपके दो आर्गुमेंट्स हैं। सबसे पहले वो इसके अंदर में आया होगा, ये कॉल हिट हुआ, इट गोज हियर, सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल इट प्रिंट्स इनसाइड द सेकंड आर्गुमेंट कंस्ट्रक्टर। नेम एज सेट हो गया, फिर ये वाला लाइन एग्जीक्यूट हुआ इनसाइड थर्ड आर कंस्ट्रक्टर एंड देन इट इज प्रिंटिंग। सो इस तरीके से आप क्लासेस से ऑब्जेक्ट बनाते हो, और इस तरीके से डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टर्स यू हैव इन अ क्लास। So far what we have done, boss, is that if we go back and come here, we have so far seen what a class is. We have seen that how from the class I can go and create the objects. And for creating the object, you have a concept called as the constructors. In the constructor, you have also talked about what are the default constructors. You have seen that what are the custom constructors. You have understood what is the constructor overloading. And you have understood how the constructor can be called constructor chaining, when you go and call the constructor inside the another constructor. And in this process, you have understood a concept called as a this. Two uses of this right now. This is used to indicate the object that is getting created, and it is used to go and call the another constructor of the same class. Am I clear till this point? Does it make sense? Is everyone crystal clear till this point? So we have covered two very important concepts. One is called as a class, another object is called as a object. And said that, now we are all set to move to a new topic, which is based on the concept that we have learned so far in the class and the objects. So we are going to get started with the very first principle of the object-oriented principles, and that first principle is called as abstraction. सर जितनी भी चीजें मैं आपको ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रोग्रामिंग की बताऊंगा, all of that will be related to the real world. Because programming, everything that we do in the world of the software programming is all inspired that how do we live our life in the real world itself. And I'll prove that with every concept that we teach you. Now, this word called abstraction has been derived from the word called as an abstract. Abstract का मतलब क्या होता है? Abstract का मतलब होता है you only show the important details. You go and hide unnecessary थिंग्स, जितनी भी अननेसेसरी चीजें हैं उसको आप जाके हाइड कर देते हो, एंड यू ओनली गो एंड शो द इंपॉर्टेंट डिटेल, दैट्स टिपिकली इज कॉल्ड एज एन एब्स्ट्रैक्ट। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर आप में से कुछ लोगों ने रिसर्च में इंटरेस्ट लिया होगा, कुछ पेपर लिखा होगा, if or you would have read some scientific journals, research papers, every paper will have something called as an abstract at the top. What does that mean? That means typically उस पेपर में जो भी रिसर्च हुआ उसका जो इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है वो लिखा होगा, जो आपके लिए इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है दैट विल बी हिडन आउट ऑफ इट। ये जो पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट है एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का, इट हैज अ रियल वर्ल्ड सिग्निफिकेंस आल्सो, रियल वर्ल्ड। हम लोग अपने रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में a lot of abstraction we make use of, otherwise life would become very complicated. I'll give you a few examples. See, if I go and take example of car, right? I learned driving in just 2 days. And the reason I was able to learn driving so fast, right? Because car makes use of abstraction. When I'm driving car, when you're driving car, when you go and rotate this in the clockwise direction, you know that it will move in the right direction. When you rotate in the anti-clockwise direction, you move that the whole car will be moving the left way. So when you are dealing with the steering wheel, whenever you do this, you know that internally it might be using some kind of thrust, some kind of levers, pulleys, right? Exhaust engine pressure. Internally, inside the mechanics of the car, a lot many things has to happen for you to maneuver your car, for you to drive your car. But all these details has been abstracted out. आपको टेंशन लेने की जरूरत है नहीं, आपको बस ये पता है कि बॉस अगर मैं स्टीयरिंग व्हील को रोटेट करूंगा क्लॉकवाइज तो गाड़ी दाएं तरफ मुड़ जाएगी, इफ आई गो एंड रोटेट इट एंटी क्लॉकवाइज डायरेक्शन माय होल कार विल बी मूविंग टू द लेफ्ट हैंड साइड, एंड दैट्स व्हाट वर्क्स। इट्स ओनली बिकॉज ऑफ द एब्स्ट्रैक्शन आई एम एबल टू ड्राइव। अदरवाइज लेट्स से दैट अगर मुझे जब भी मुझे कार को मूव करना है, इफ आई हैव टू थिंक अराउंड दैट हाउ मच प्रेशर, हाउ मच एग्जॉस्ट फ्यूल थ्रस्ट, know which lever, which pulley has to interact, then only I can move my car, it becomes increasingly impossible for me to go and drive the car. So I'm able to drive car because there is an abstraction. This is one example of it. दूसरा एग्जांपल आपको दिखाता हूं। आप सभी ने सुना होगा टेस्ला कार के बारे में। टेस्ला कार के बारे में कहते हैं कि इट इज 80% सॉफ्टवेयर एंड दैट 20% मैकेनिकल पार्ट्स। नॉर्मली लोग बोलते हैं कि टेस्ला कार को इम्प्रोवाइज करने के लिए सॉफ्टवेयर अपडेट्स की जरूरत पड़ती है। फॉर दैट यू डोंट हैव टू ब्रिंग देम टू द कार टू द मैकेनिक शॉप फॉर द सर्विसिंग, एंड एवरी टाइम देयर इज अ सॉफ्टवेयर अपडेट द कार गेट्स अपग्रेडेड। पर कार अपग्रेड होने के बाद क्या ड्राइवर को फिर से उस कार को ड्राइव करना सीखने की जरूरत है? All the changes that happens with the upgrade, all are hidden. सॉफ्टवेयर अपग्रेड के पहले भी जैसे ड्राइव होता था कार वैसे अभी भी ड्राइव होगा, जस्ट दैट इट इज गॉट बेटर एंड इट इज पॉसिबल ऑल बिकॉज ऑफ एब्स्ट्रैक्शन। ठीक है, एक और एग्जांपल देता हूं मैं एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का आपको, ताकि आप उसको रिलेट कर पाओ। आई बिलीव ऑल ऑफ यू मस्ट बी यूज्ड अ प्लेटफॉर्म कॉल्ड एज अ फेसबुक। मार्क जकरबर्ग और उसके दोस्तों ने मिलकर मान लीजिए एप्लीकेशन को बनाया था 10-15 साल पहले। ठीक है, ना जब पहली दफा फेसबुक बना था उस समय भी यूजर को अगर लॉगिन करना होता है तो यूजर को अपना देना पड़ता है यूजर नेम, यूजर को प्रोवाइड करना पड़ता है अपना पासवर्ड, और यूजर को दबाना पड़ता है एक बटन कॉल्ड एज सबमिट। दिस इज द वेरी फर्स्ट वर्जन ऑफ द फेसबुक दैट वी हैड। द वेरी फर्स्ट वर्जन, लेट्स से द वर्जन 1, ठीक है ना, यूजर का यूजर नेम एंड पासवर्ड लाइक क्रेडेंशियल्स को पहले स्टोर करते थे। लेट्स से दैट वी आर स्टोर्ड इन द केस ऑफ द फाइल इटसेल्फ, दैट वाज द वर्जन 1। The version 2, when user used to log in, the credentials got started getting stored in the database in the form of the string. फिर धीरे धीरे चीजें जैसे वर्ल्ड इवॉल्व, मे बी इन द वर्जन 3 you started storing in the database but using the encryption. More and more people started coming in, so you started storing the data in the distributed world with the replication. And let's say that this is like say version N, which is today. Today we are using the multi-factor authentication and a lot of machine learning risk analysis. Point that I'm trying to tell here is that from 10, 12 years ago, users were told that boss, if you have to log into a Facebook page, you have to provide the username, you have to provide the password, you have to provide the submit button. This has remained intact, but underlyingly पहले शायद हम उस credentials को फाइल में स्टोर करते थे, फिर बाद में अगले वर्जन में डेटाबेस में स्टोर करने लगे, फिर उसके बाद मान लो encryption यूज करने लगे. All these details, how I'm storing the data, is not essential for the end user. So all these details that how it is being implemented was hidden. Only the important details for an end user is that boss मेरा यूजर ने मुझे कहाँ डालना है, पासवर्ड कहाँ पे डालना है और सबमिट बटन कैसे क्लिक करना है. This whole concept has allowed Facebook to evolve, improve its internal details, and this is called as abstraction. Am I clear, people? Does it make sense? Everyone in the class, guys, are you making sense? Is this point making sense to you people? Everyone in the class? तो एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का मतलब क्या है दोस्त? एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का मतलब है एब्स्ट्रैक्शन. एब्स्ट्रैक्शन का मतलब है हाइडिंग unnecessary details. This is the meaning of abstraction. And why do you need to do the abstraction? Abstraction आप करते हो ताकि first of all it makes the life of the customer easy, right? Remember the reason that I gave you? I was able to learn driving, or you were able to learn driving faster because the whole process that when you move or rotate your steering wheel, how it changes or rotates your tire of your vehicle is abstracted out. The people have been able to use Tesla car every day, even after the upgrade, is because even after the upgrades, the Tesla still needs the same way of driving the car. The people have been able to stick to the Facebook so far is only because every time the Facebook has to make internal changes, it doesn't impact how the user is going to log into the system. So the first advantage of the abstraction is that it makes the life of the customer easy. That's number one. Number two, since you're hiding, it makes things more secure. Why? Because you are hiding the implementation detail, because you are hiding the implementation details. That's number two. तीसरा एडवांटेज है, it helps you in writing a loosely coupled code. अभी loosely coupled code is more from the perspective of the code design, code quality और code design. जब हम आगे जाके डिजाइन पैटर्न्स, डिजाइन प्रिंसिपल्स की बात करेंगे तो लूज कपलिंग क्या है वो हमें ज्यादा समझ में आएगा तब. पर अभी के लिए आप ये मान लो कि ये भी एक रीजन है बिकॉज ऑफ व्हिच यू शुड लाइक टू गो एंड अप्रोच द abstraction. Am I clear till this point? Does it make sense? Everyone in the class? Is everyone making sense? अब बात आई कि भैया जावा में अगर मुझे एब्स्ट्रैक्शन को इंप्लीमेंट करना है, if I have to go and implement abstraction in the Java, how do I go and do it? How do I go and apply the abstraction in the world of Java? So abstraction in Java could be achieved in two ways. There are two ways in which you can go and achieve the abstraction in Java. One is called as using the abstract classes. And the another way is by making use of interfaces. दो तरीका होता है जिससे आप abstraction achieve करते हो Java में. Using a concept called as an abstract class and another concept is called as an interfaces. Ab dost, this is a very important question from the interview perspective. डिफरेंस क्या होता है एब्स्ट्रैक्ट और इंटरफेसेस के बीच में थोड़ा सा भी देखेंगे एंड आई वुड वांट कि इस सेशन के बाद आप थोड़ा सा इसको और डीप डाइव करो. go and deep dive because that will help you clarify your concepts around the Java abstraction. पर अभी के लिए आप ये समझ लो कि abstract classes is used to achieve abstraction in Java, and this help you achieve abstraction between 0 to 100%. Whereas interfaces always gives you the 100% abstraction. Let's say to see that with the help of a code example. Okay, let's say to see that with the help of a code example. So let me go and open my Eclipse. Okay, and here in this case, let me go and write something called as new class. And let me go and understand something called abstraction. So in order to define a class called as an abstract, let's say that I go and define a abstract class called as an animal, right? Let me do a class animal. अगर किसी क्लास को मुझे एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बनाना है तो उसके आगे मुझे एक कीवर्ड यूज करना होता है, इसको मैं कहता हूँ एब्स्ट्रैक्ट कीवर्ड. If I have to make a class abstract, I have to go and make use of a keyword called as abstract and as a prefix to the class, which indicate that this is an abstract class. Abstract class के अंदर में let me go and define something called as a public void. ये जो मेथड है वो मैंने प्रॉपर मेथड बना दिया, राइट? दिस इज अ प्रॉपर मेथड. इसके अंदर में मैं एक और मेथड बना सकता हूँ which is say for example public void drink. Abstract class is a kind of a class which can have both kind of a methods. A method which does not have any kind of implementation detail. As you can see, it's only the signature. There is no implementation detail there. This will be called as an abstract method. This will be called as an abstract method. On the other hand, this method which has all the details inside this will be called as a concrete method. So an abstract class is a class which should have at least one abstract method. But अगर नहीं है, तो it will not give you any kind of error. So abstract class will have the eat method and this. इसको यूज कैसे करेंगे? When should I go and make use of? इसको थोड़ा सा और हम लोग अभी समझेंगे जब आगे आके एक कॉन्सेप्ट आएगा called as inheritance. Please wait for that concept for some time. But when we go to the inheritance level, then we will understand that how it will be used. But for now, just understand that abstract class is a kind of a class which is prefixed with the keyword called as an abstract and should have at least, you should keep at least one method which has no implementation details, and that method will be called as an abstract. This is an abstract class. Similarly, I will have something called as a interface. And we'll be going to call it as animal2. Interface has all the methods. So for example, if I go and say the public void eat. But if I go and try to write something like this, public void drink, and I go this is out drinking water. ये allowed नहीं है. Interfaces are just like abstract classes, but what happens in the case of the interface is that this is not allowed, boss. You cannot have a concrete method inside an interface. You can only have the abstract methods. So for example, in this case, if I go and remove this whole implementation, if I go and remove this entire implementation, then this looks okay. So that's why I go and say that interface, when you have, this leads to 100% of abstraction. And this abstract class typically will have 0 to 100%. अब आपके लिए क्वेश्चन जो है, जो मैं चाहता हूँ कि आगे जाके थोड़ा डीप डाइव करो एंड यू रीड अबाउट इट एंड कम बैक प्रिपेयर्ड फॉर दैट, इज दैट typically what's the difference between these two, and when to use what, when to use what, who. So now आगे बढ़ते हैं sir. So far what we have done is that we have covered the first concept of object oriented principle, which is called as an abstraction. And we have known what is an abstraction. Abstraction is hiding unnecessary details. And how do we achieve in Java? We achieve abstraction in Java with the help of the two concepts. One is called as, what is that? Abstract class. And the second point is not abstract class, it is called as inheritance. And now since we have covered abstraction, we are all set to move to the next concept of object-oriented principle, which is called as encapsulation. Okay, let's try to talk about the encapsulation. So what is encapsulation? Encapsulation, it has been derived from the word called as capsule. I think we all are used of eating medicine in the form of the capsules, right? The two compositions capsuled together, right? That's how the capsule looks like. Encapsulations, the formal definition of the encapsulation is that binding the state and behavior together. पर अभी आप इसको देखते ही आप कंफ्यूज हो जाओगे, मुझे पता है। तो इसको थोड़ा सा इजी तरीके से समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, सो दैट वंस यू लर्न द एनकैप्सुलेशन पूरी लाइफ में आप कभी भूल ना पाओ, ठीक है। And as I told you, the entire concept of object-oriented principle is inspired from the real world. So ये जो encapsulation that is also inspired from the real world itself. ठीक है, चलिए कैसे होता है देखते हैं. So if I go and talk about the real world, for example, if I talk about a person like me, we have few things which is very personal to us. For example, I have a name which is, for example, Vishwa, right? I have something called as a car which I drive. Now in the real world, your things are yours. Nobody can come and claim that. For example, nobody can, and I cannot allow anyone to say that, boss, okay, आज से तुम्हारा नाम विश्वा change करके सलमान हो जाता है, right? I cannot allow that. I cannot, any person, let's say that any Tom, Dick, and Harry say that, hey, boss, आज से तुम्हारी car मेरी car. Can I allow that? I cannot allow that to happen. This is my car. I have got this car with my hard-earned money. So whatever the people have, whatever the position that they have, whatever the state they have, typically they are the one private property. They don't allow other people to go and make changes or do any kind of thing with those private things. Similarly, if I'm trying to create a similar people in the world of programming, I'd want that the field and state, no one should change. No one should change. No other class should be able to change the field or the state. And to achieve this, what we do is that we have to make this field and the state as private. So what that means is, for example, if I go and open my Eclipse, let me take one example. So let's say that I go and define a class called as a person one. Okay, this person has a state called as public, string name, equal names, and then I have something public string card. और फिर मैं यहाँ पे क्या करता हूँ, let me go and define a constructor here. So public person one, and then I have the string name, and then I have string card, and then I go and set this dot name, is equal to name. This dot car is equals to car. Right? I have this person class. I have the string name and string car, and then I have a constructor called as person one, and then I say that this dot name is equals to name and this dot car is equals to car. Okay, this is how this person one dot Java looks like. And let's say that I go and define another class called as test, and here in this test class, we call as app class. That's what we call as public static void main. और यहाँ पे मैं लिखूंगा person one p1 equals to new person. ठीक है, और मैं मान लेता हूँ इसका नाम लिख देता हूँ विश्वा, और इसका मैं कार लिख देता हूँ i20. Let me go and call it as now once I have created this, right? At this point of time, if I go and print this out, p1 dot name and run this, it's printing Vishwa. But then I am allowed to go and change this. I can go and change this p dot name is equals to, let's say that I go and put it as Salman. And again, if I go and run this, I go and see that boss, the naam he change ho gaya hai. Now this is wrong, right? Because for example, there's a guy, ये जो बंदा है, ये जो बंदा है, इसका जो नाम था, उसका नाम था विश्वा, and it was his private name. But you cannot allow others to change it. Other people should not be allowed to change it because that doesn't what happens in the real world. आपकी जो private चीज है वो private है. Nobody is allowed to go and change that. How can you allow that in the world of the programming? So आपको पहली चीज ये करनी है कि जो भी ऑब्जेक्ट है उसका स्टेट nobody should change. Here you see I am able to change the state of the object, which is wrong. Make sense? How do I do it? I do it by using the philosophy of the encapsulation, which says that, boss, everything by default that you do. For example, here I make this public as private. I make this as private. As soon as I do it, as soon as I make this thing as private, you can see that I am not allowed to change here now. I'm not able to even go and access it. So the first principle of encapsulation says that, boss, make sure that nobody is able to access the private fields. And that's why all the state of the class should be made private. This is the first rule of encapsulation says. What the encapsulation says that? The first rule of encapsulation says that the first rule is saying that one field should be private. All the fields should be private. Am I clear, people? Does it make sense? Okay, field should be private. Now, what is the another use? That's the second part of the encapsulation. Again, let's take the example of this. Let's say that there are two people, right? Let's say that there's a person called as Rahul, and parallel to it, there's another person called as Banarakas. Okay. Both of them are living in their house in a village called as Fulera. Let's say that there's a house called as Fulera village. Rahul is a very decent person, right? And he likes to serve his neighbor. Banrakas is making use of Rahul. तो राहुल के घर में एक मान लो किचन है. बनराकस को जब भी मौका मिलता है, he goes into the kitchen, takes the sugar and brings it to his house for making the tea all the time. Right? तो जब भी बनराकस को चाय की जरूरत होती है, चीनी की जरूरत होती है, वो दौड़ते दौड़ते जाता है किचन में, चीनी लेता है, दौड़ के वापस आता है और फिर अपने घर में चाय बना लेता है. ना जब भी राहुल को अपना चाय बनाना होता है, ही इज नेवर श्योर कि घर में चीनी होगी कि नहीं होगी, बिकॉज चीनी वो लाके रखा तो था, पर बनराकस कभी भी आता है और चीनी लेके वापस चला जाता है. तो व्हेन राहुल गोज इन हिज किचन टू मेक द टी, ही माइट फाइंड शुगर, ही माइट नॉट फाइंड शुगर. सो जब इस टाइप की स्थिति होती है वेयर एन ऑब्जेक्ट उसके अपने स्टेट पे कोई, उसके बिहेवियर पे कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है, राइट, then anybody can come and make changes into that, right? So this is a state when you have no encapsulation. When you have no encapsulation, you have no control on the state, you have no predictability on the state, you don't know how the state will look like, how it will behave, how it will stay. On the other hand, इसी को मैं अगर encapsulated word में बोलूं कि मैं फिर से फुलेरा में आ गया हूं, and there's a guy called as Rahul, and there's a person called as Banrakas, right? Now in the kitchen, there is sugar. But what you have done is that in the top of it, you have put a lock. So now next time when the Banrakas came in, he saw that, okay, boss, shit, I cannot go inside the kitchen because there is a lock. So now what the Banrakas will do, if the Banrakas has to go inside the kitchen, then the Banrakas will have to come and ask Rahul that, Rahul, यार, मेरी गर्लफ्रेंड आई है, क्या मुझे चीनी मिल सकता है ताकि मैं उसको चाय बना के पिला सकूं? Now it's up to Rahul now. If the Rahul aligns, he will allow him to go inside, take the sugar and go and make that. If the Rahul says no, he is not allowed to do it. So when I go and put a lock like this, I have a control on the state. This is what the encapsulation does. So encapsulation कहता है कि दोस्त, encapsulation बोलता है दोस्त, आप क्या करो, आप सबसे पहले क्या करो, फील्ड्स को प्राइवेट कर दो. ठीक है ना? बट अगर प्राइवेट कर दोगे तो कोई इसको एक्सेस ही नहीं कर पाएगा. देयर हैज टू बी अ कंट्रोल्ड वे ऑफ एक्सेसिंग द प्राइवेट फील्ड्स. And for doing that, what you should do is that you should go and provide some kind of public setter and getters. For example, in the real world also, let's say that if I have a name which is Vishwa, and say for example I have a car which is, say for example, I-20, to anyone in the world, external world, I cannot allow them to have any kind of access. No, not allowed. But to some specific people in the valid case, for example, if it is my dad who's saying that, boss, बेटा अपने नाम के आगे ना सिंह लगा लो because ये हमारे खानदान का सरनेम है. Now ultimately it is my decision, but then if it is dad, then I have some way through which they can go and access my name and they should be able to change it. Similarly, let's say that if my sister calls me and says that, hey भाई मेरा car has a breakdown, तो मैं बोलूंगा it's all your car, sister, you know, take my car and take it anywhere you want. So even though we don't want a uncontrolled access, but for certain people, they should have a channel through which they can go and access my private fields. So this is what the encapsulation is saying. Encapsulation says very simple words, key boss. If I have to go and apply the encapsulation, you have to do two things. One, I have to make the fields private. That's number one. And number two thing is that I have to go and provide a public setter and getters. When you go and apply these two things in a class, you go and say that, boss, I'm making use of encapsulation. देखते हैं code के example से. So if I go and open my Eclipse here, इसको अगर मुझे इनकैप्सुलेशन के लिए करना है, because it's private field, what I'll have to do is that I have to go and provide the public getters and setters. For example, if it is a name, then I can say the public string get name, and then I should go and return this dot. And then I have to have a setter also, which I'm going to call it public void right? And similarly for the car, I can have this public get car, turn this dot car, and I should have something called a set car also. So I'm going to call it as public void set car string car. This dot car is equals to car. So this is how this person one class looks like. So whenever in a class, boss, so whenever in a class, you make the fields private and you make this public methods and private fields, so that if somebody has to access the field, they have to make use of a method. This is called as encapsulation. This is called as encapsulation. Am I clear, people? Does it make sense? Cool. So with that, I don't want to make this session very overwhelming. So what we'll do a quick revision and then we'll continue with the next part of this in the next session. Okay, I don't want to make a very long session. I know that you guys lose focus. So I'll keep more frequent sessions instead of having one very big session. So I'll just do a quick revision. So far in the today's session, we started talking about the OOPS concept. We have started talking about the class. We started talking about the objects. And in the process, we talked about the constructors and its types. Once it was done, we started talking about the first concept, which was called as abstraction. And after abstraction, we have talked about something called as encapsulation. The keywords around the abstraction was that in the world of Java, you do it with the help of abstract class, and you do it with the help of something called as interfaces. Encapsulation you make by fields private and then public methods. This is how it looks like. Am I clear, people? Does it make sense? With that, you guys have been amazing. Those people who have been sitting since the beginning till last. We'll just stop the session right now and we'll schedule another session when we move to the next part of the OOPS where we go and talk about inheritance. We'll talk about polymorphism. And post then we'll move to the advanced topics of the Java where we go and talk around nested classes, exception handling, multi-threading, all those concepts. आप में से कई लोगों ने कमेंट डाले थे कि we should have a dedicated pre-planned sessions on the interview questions. Let's do that also. So I'll set up some time where we pick up the topics and we think about all the important questions which could be asked in the interview from that given Java topic itself. With that, I'll stop the session now. Thank you everyone for the joining. Keep me in the posted in the comments. How do you like the session? That motivates me to pull off in spite of my busy schedule. That is still keep on coming live to you people, start teaching you, teach you more. And that's my intention for the next few months. Thank you everyone. Thanks for joining on the Saturday afternoon. I'll see you guys again in the next video. Thank you and all the best.